I'm Teresa, and here's your Teaching Tip Tuesday. We have student data coming from a lot of different places. We have criterion reference data that comes from our standardized tests at the end of a school year. We sometimes have norm reference data that comes from standardized tests students take throughout the year. We have unit assessments, we have quizzes, we have homework, we have quick checks. Data is coming from everywhere. So what do we do with all that? Data isn't really helpful unless we know the best way to analyze it. So you got your data back. Now what? Today we're going to talk about how to analyze student data to improve instruction. So what does data show us? Well, first, it shows us what students know. It clearly outlines skills that they've mastered and gives us a good picture of what they already know how to do. It can also tell us how far students have grown. It can tell us if they've grown this amount from last year, from another checkpoint in the year. It gives us a good gauge to see how far they've come. And it also shows us how effective our teaching practices have been. If we see a lot of students have made tremendous growth, what we're doing is probably working. So what does data not show us? Data does not determine whether you are a good or bad teacher. It is information for us to use to evaluate our practices. Maybe something we used with last year's class in that content area worked really well, but it's not working with this year's class. That's okay. That's information that we can use to drive our next steps. It does not determine your self-worth as a teacher or your value. It's just information that you can use as you plan out your next steps for instruction. So I thought of a movie that kind of illustrates a good example of analyzing data. You may have seen it, Moneyball, Brad Pitt. It's basically about a manager who is trying to improve a failing baseball team, a team that's not winning, doesn't have a great record. And so all they know is we got to win more games. But they had to change the way that they looked at their data to improve their team. They didn't have a ton of money to bring in superstars, but they started looking at what players can we bring in with what we have to improve our team? How can we offset some strengths and weaknesses of players to turn our season around? And it ended up being pretty successful. So in our classrooms, in a similar way, we have to determine what our end goal is. What do we want to get from this data? Where do we want to grow students? What's our end goal for them? We also have to consider what do we have available to us. Unfortunately, we do not have endless time or money or resources to pour into our students. But what do we have? What do we have that we can use to make a difference with students? And finally, what are our next steps going to be? What do we need to adjust about our instruction or change that might help students make the growth that we're looking for? We have to determine the best next step and the best resources or adjustment in our instructional strategies that will make all the difference. So to recap, the next time you get a set of data, remember that it does not determine your value as a teacher. It's information for you to use to move forward. I'd love to hear some strategies and tips that you have for interpreting and analyzing your data. Leave that in the comments down below. And remember, never stop learning because life never stops teaching.